My brother said it casually, like he was talking about the weather. Make sure you're not around when we leave for Paris. It would be awkward if you tried to tag along. We were sitting at the dinner table. Plates half full. Glasses sweating in the warm light. My mother didn't look up. My father nodded slowly, as if this had already been discussed somewhere I hadn't been invited to. It's just, not your place anymore, my dad added, clearing his throat. You'd feel uncomfortable. I felt the words before I understood them. Not your place anymore. I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions. I didn't remind them that I'd helped my brother through college, that I'd watched his kids when he and his wife wanted a break, that I'd quietly paid for things no one ever thanked me for. I simply raised my glass, forced a smile, and said, understood. They relaxed instantly. That's what hurt the most. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat alone in my apartment with the lights off. The city hummed outside my window. I replayed the dinner over and over, catching details I'd missed the first time, the way my brother smirked when he said Paris, the way my mother avoided my eyes, the way my father seemed relieved I hadn't pushed back. I wasn't angry. I was clear. You see, there was something my family didn't know about me. Something I'd learned a long time ago to keep quiet. Silence had always been safer. But silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it's just preparation. I opened my laptop and logged into an account none of them had ever seen. Not because I'd hidden it maliciously, but because no one had ever cared enough to ask. The travel confirmations were all there. First-class tickets. Hotel reservations overlooking the Seine. Private transfers. Everything prepaid, everything booked through a corporate account tied to a holding company my brother had proudly mentioned once at dinner, bragging about how his firm had finally made it. I stared at the screen for a long time before moving the cursor. I didn't cancel anything right away. Instead, I waited. The next morning, my phone buzzed with photos. My brother and his wife at the airport. Champagne flutes clinking. Smiling kids leaning into leather seats. My mother had added heart emojis. My father sent a thumbs up. I replied with a single word. Safe travels. Then I closed the app. 2 days passed. I went to work like normal. Meetings. Emails. Deadlines. On the third night, my phone lit up again. This time, it wasn't cheerful. Hey, weird question, my brother texted. You didn't mess with anything, right? I read the message slowly. Another followed immediately. Boarding pass won't scan. Then another. Call me. Now. I didn't respond. At check-in, the airline attendant had politely explained that their reservation had been altered. Not cancelled, altered. Seats downgraded. Lounge access revoked. Hotel rebooked. Transfers removed. The tone professional, the smile practiced. My brother argued. He demanded a supervisor. He name-dropped contacts he didn't actually have. The line behind them grew longer. His kids grew restless. That's when his phone rang. It was me. I answered calmly. Oh, I said, as if surprised. You're having trouble? What did you do? He hissed, turning away from the counter. I adjusted what was mine, I replied. That's all. He went quiet. Because in that moment, standing in a crowded airport with his family watching, something finally clicked. Not fully, not yet. But enough to scare him. You said I wasn't welcome, I continued. So I made sure I wasn't involved. You can't do this, he snapped. You don't even work with. I don't work for you, I interrupted gently. Never have. There was shouting in the background. His wife demanding answers, an attendant calling their name again. I could picture it perfectly. I ended the call. 10 minutes later, my mother called. Then my father. Then my brother again. Missed calls stacked up, one after another. I let them ring. That night, while they waited in a budget hotel far from the city center, I sat at my kitchen table and finally allowed myself to feel it, not revenge, not anger, but something steadier. Boundaries. They still didn't know the full truth. Not yet. They only knew something had changed, and they were no longer in control of it. And that scared them more than anything else ever had. By morning, the messages had stopped coming in rapid fire. Not because the panic had passed, but because something worse had replaced it, confusion. I woke up to a single text from my father. "We need to talk." No accusations. No anger. Just that sentence, short. Careful. I didn't reply right away. I went through my routine slowly, deliberately. Coffee brewed. Shower ran. Clothes pressed. Every small action reminded me how long I'd lived my life reacting to other people's needs instead of my own decisions. That morning felt different, lighter. Like the weight had finally shifted. Around noon, my mother called again. This time, I answered. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, skipping any greeting. Her voice wasn't angry, it was shaken. "Your brother is embarrassed. The kids are upset. People are watching. People are watching." That was always her biggest fear. "I didn't do anything to him," I said calmly. "I just stepped out." "You know that's not true," she replied quickly. "You're being dramatic." I smiled to myself. Dramatic. That word had followed me my entire life. Anytime I stood up. Anytime I didn't shrink back into the role they'd assigned me. "Mom," I said, "when was the last time you asked how I felt?" Silence. Not defensive silence. Not angry silence. The kind where someone realizes they don't have an answer. "I didn't think," she started. "I know," I replied. "You never did." She hung up shortly after that. Not because she was done talking, but because she didn't know how to continue when the script changed. Later that afternoon, my brother showed up at my door. He didn't knock at first. Just stood there, pacing the hallway. When he finally did knock, it was sharp and impatient, like always. I opened the door and stepped aside, letting him in without a word. He looked smaller than I remembered. Wrinkled clothes. Dark circles under his eyes. Confidence drained and replaced with something brittle. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded. "You embarrassed us. Do you have any idea how this looks?" I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You told me not to come." I listened. "That wasn't," he stopped himself, exhaling hard. "That wasn't meant like this." "How was it meant, then?" I asked. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Tried again. "You're always so sensitive," he finally said. "You read too much into things." There it was. The familiar deflection. The old move that had always worked. But this time, it didn't. "You didn't want me there," I said. "You didn't want to be associated with me. So I removed myself from the picture." "That doesn't give you the right to mess with my life," he snapped. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You've been living off the benefits of my silence for years. I didn't mess with your life. I stopped protecting it." His face drained of color. "What are you talking about?" he asked quietly. I picked up my phone and unlocked it, turning the screen toward him. Just enough for him to see names. Accounts. Numbers. He stared at it like it was written in another language. "That account," I said, "the one your company uses for vendor credit and travel perks? It's not owned by your firm. It never was." He swallowed. "It's under a holding group," I continued, "that I created years ago. Back when everyone thought I was wasting my potential." "You're lying," he said automatically. But his voice lacked conviction. "I'm not," I replied. "And if I were, you'd already have called your lawyer." He didn't deny it. Instead, he sank into the chair across from me, rubbing his face with both hands. "Why didn't you tell us?" he muttered. I laughed softly. Not cruelly. Honestly. You never asked, I said. You were too busy deciding who I was for me. He looked up then, eyes sharp. So what now? You going to ruin us? Make some big show out of it? I shook my head. No. That surprised him. I'm not interested in revenge, I continued. I'm interested in clarity. You told me I didn't belong. I believed you. What does that mean? He asked. It means, I said slowly, that from now on, I don't fund, fix, or quietly support anything that treats me like an embarrassment. His phone buzzed. A message from his wife. Then another. He didn't check them. You can't just disappear, he said. Family doesn't work like that. I met his eyes. Family also doesn't work when one person is only useful as long as they stay invisible. He stood up abruptly. This isn't over, he warned. I nodded. No. It's just finally honest. When he left, the apartment felt impossibly quiet. But it wasn't empty. It was peaceful. That evening, the calls started again. Extended family. Aunts. Cousins. People who had barely spoken to me in years suddenly concerned. I ignored them all. Because the truth was, what happened in Paris was only the beginning. The real shock wasn't the downgraded flights or cancelled perks. It was what would happen when they realized how much of their stability had been built on something they never understood. And how easily it could all unravel. The collapse didn't happen all at once. It never does. It starts quietly, behind closed doors, in meetings where voices lower and smiles disappear. 3 days after my brother stormed out of my apartment, the first domino fell. I got an email from a law firm I recognized immediately. Polite. Formal. Carefully worded. They wanted to clarify my role in several financial structures connected to my brother's company. I forwarded it to my attorney with a single line. Proceed as discussed. Because yes, we had discussed this. Years ago. Back when I learned the safest way to survive in a family like mine was to prepare for the day they would finally notice me not with pride, but with need. By the end of the week, the truth had spread faster than gossip ever could. The vendor credit lines my brother relied on were frozen pending review. Not shut down. Just paused. Enough to disrupt operations without creating drama. Investors started asking questions. Quiet questions. The dangerous kind. At a family dinner I didn't attend, my name came up more times than it ever had before. I know this because my aunt called me afterward, her voice trembling between apology and curiosity. We didn't know, she said. You were always so quiet. I almost corrected her. But I didn't. Quiet wasn't weakness. Quiet was strategy. My mother showed up at my door the following Sunday. No warning. No call ahead. She looked older than she had a month earlier. Not physically, emotionally. The kind of aging that happens when certainty cracks. I raised you better than this, she said after I let her in. I gestured for her to sit. Did you? She bristled. We gave you everything. You gave me expectations, I replied. And disappointment when I didn't live inside them. She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped, sat down slowly. Why didn't you tell us what you were doing? She asked quietly. I leaned across from her. Because every time I tried to be more, you asked me to be less. Less visible. Less ambitious. Less embarrassing. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. We were protecting you, she whispered. No, I said gently. You were protecting the image of the family. I just didn't fit into it. She stayed for an hour. Tried to explain. Tried to rewrite history. Tried to soften words that had already hardened into memory. Nothing changed. The real reckoning came 2 weeks later. My brother's company announced a temporary restructuring. That's the phrase they use when the truth sounds too ugly. Executives reshuffled. Projects paused. My brother quietly removed from public-facing leadership to focus on internal matters. That night, he called me. No shouting. No blame. Just exhaustion. You win, he said. I closed my eyes. This was never a competition. You took everything, he replied bitterly. I exhaled slowly. I took myself out of a system that only worked because I stayed silent. He didn't answer. I didn't ruin you, I continued. I just stopped saving you. The line went dead. After that, the calls slowed. Then stopped. Family gatherings continued without me. I wasn't invited, but this time, it wasn't punishment. It was fear. Because now they knew something they couldn't unlearn. The person they dismissed had been the most prepared among them. Months later, I stood at an airport cafe, watching a family pose for photos near the departure gate. Laughter. Excitement. The same scene I'd once watched from the outside. My phone buzzed. A message from my father. I should have listened. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then typed back, "You still can. Just not the way you want." I boarded my flight alone. Not because I was unwanted, but because for the first time in my life, I was choosing myself without apology, without explanation, without shrinking. They thought excluding me would teach me my place. What it taught me instead was my power. And once you see that clearly, you never go back.